January 11th, 1997 was supposed to be one of those nights where the league finally saw Michael Jordan and the Bulls tested by what looked like a genuine super team. The Houston Rockets, armed with 3 future Hall of Famers, Hakeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler, and Charles Barkley, walked into the United Center with the aura of destiny around them. They weren't just another opponent on the schedule. They were built to be the one team that could push Jordan to his limits. But as the final buzzer rang, the world realized this was less of a contest and more of a reminder. No matter how many stars lined up on the other side, the crown still belonged to Michael Jordan. By the mid-90s, Jordan had already solidified himself as the standard of greatness. Every player, every team, every so-called challenger was measured by how they performed against number 23. And while many believed the Rockets trio carried the perfect mix of size, skill, and experience to topple the Bulls, Jordan had other plans. Nights like these weren't pressure for him, they were fuel. He thrived when the hype tilted toward the other team. He wanted those whispers that someone else might have caught up to him, because they always ended up setting the stage for another unforgettable performance. The Rockets weren't some unproven squad. Hakeem Olajuwon was fresh off his back-to-back championships in the early 90s, still one of the most dominant centers the game had ever seen. His footwork, finesse, and ability to control the paint made him a nightmare matchup for any opponent. Clyde Drexler, the longtime Blazer and Jordan's rival from the 1992 finals, brought his veteran scoring and playmaking to the wing. And then there was Charles Barkley, the final piece of the puzzle, acquired the summer before in a blockbuster trade. A relentless rebounder, fierce competitor, and one of the most outspoken stars in basketball, Barkley gave the Rockets toughness and personality. On paper, this was a dream team. On the court against Jordan, it turned into a nightmare. Chicago entered the game as the reigning champions, a dynasty riding high after their record-breaking 72-win season the year before. Jordan, now in his mid-30s, wasn't slowing down. He had evolved from the acrobatic high flyer of the 80s into a ruthless, efficient assassin, dominating games with mid-range jumpers, post moves, and unshakable intensity. Alongside him was Scottie Pippen, the ultimate do-it-all star, and Dennis Rodman, the league's most ferocious rebounder. Add in Ron Harper's defense, Tony Kukoc's versatility, and Steve Kerr's sharpshooting, and you had a machine that didn't just win games, it crushed spirits. From the opening tip, the game showed just how wide the gap was between the Rockets' hype and the Bulls' reality. Houston looked tight, shooting just 28% in the first quarter. Even with Olajuwon working inside and Barkley hustling on the glass, they couldn't find rhythm. Drexler's offense sputtered, and the team's spacing collapsed under Chicago's suffocating defense. Meanwhile, Jordan quietly went to work. He scored 6 points in the opening frame, setting the tone without breaking a sweat. Pippen's defense rattled the Rockets' wings, and Rodman was already inside their heads, pulling down rebounds and frustrating Barkley. By the end of the quarter, Chicago held control, and the United Center crowd could feel it. This wasn't going to be a night where Houston's stars stole the spotlight. The Rockets rallied in the second quarter, at least for a moment. Olajuwon reminded the world why he was still the most skilled big man alive, scoring 9 points in the period, including a rare three-pointer that brought some life to the Houston bench. Drexler chipped in buckets, and Barkley took on the role of facilitator. For a stretch, the Rockets shot over 55% and looked like they had finally found their groove. But here's where the difference between the two teams showed. While Houston leaned entirely on its stars, Chicago leaned on its depth. Jordan scored just 2 points in the second quarter, but Jason Caffey came off the bench with 9 points and 4 rebounds. Kukoc buried a three, and Kerr knocked down a jumper. Even Randy Brown added timely energy. For the Bulls, it didn't matter if Jordan sat for stretches. The machine kept running. By halftime, the Rockets had narrowed the score, but the balance of power still tilted heavily toward Chicago. The Bulls were composed. The Rockets were just surviving. And then came the second half, the part of the game where Michael Jordan always seemed to remind everyone why he wasn't just the best player on the floor, but the best the game had ever seen. After conserving energy in the first half, Jordan unleashed fury in the final 2 quarters. In less than 20 minutes of action, he poured in 22 points, drilling mid-range jumpers, attacking the rim, and hitting 4 of 5 from deep. His control extended beyond scoring. He grabbed rebounds, dished assists, and picked pockets on defense. Every possession carried his imprint. Every shot, every steal, every pass reminded Houston that they weren't facing just another team. They were facing Michael Jordan and his dynasty. But Chicago's dominance didn't come from Jordan alone. Pippen picked his spots perfectly, scoring 13 points on near-perfect shooting while orchestrating the offense with 6 assists. Kukoc became the X factor, exploding for 17 points off the bench and stretching Houston's defense past its breaking point. And then there was Rodman, who completely demoralized Houston's front court. While Barkley and Olajuwon struggled to control the glass, Rodman vacuumed up 14 rebounds in the second half alone, turning every miss into a fresh possession for Chicago. Barkley, meanwhile, went 0 for 5 in the half, his frustration mounting with every brick and every Rodman rebound. The Rockets managed just 34% shooting after halftime. The Bulls, on the other hand, were scorching hot, knocking down 64% of their shots and burying Houston under a wave of efficiency. By the time the fourth quarter rolled around, the game wasn't about whether Chicago would win. It was about how badly they would embarrass Houston. Jordan finished with 32 points on 12 for 25 shooting, hitting 4 threes and sinking all his free throws. He didn't just outscore Houston's stars, he outclassed them. Olajuwon fought valiantly, scoring 29 points with 12 boards. But it was an empty effort. Barkley was bottled up, finishing with just 8 points. Drexler, once billed as Jordan's great rival, managed only 7. Together, the so-called super team was reduced to role players in Jordan's personal highlight reel. The Bulls cruised to a 110-86 blowout, dismantling Houston's confidence possession by possession. The numbers told the story. Chicago shot nearly 49% from the field, hit half their threes, and out-rebounded Houston 59-44. The Rockets, despite their big names, shot just 37% and looked every bit the aging roster they were. The Bulls didn't just beat them, they humbled them. And for the millions watching, it was a reminder that Jordan didn't need hype or excuses. He showed up, dominated, and left, no doubt. That night became more than just a regular season win. For Chicago, it was another checkpoint on their march toward a 5th championship. Jordan would go on to win another scoring title, another MVP, and another finals trophy later that year, cementing the Bulls' second three-peat as inevitable. For Houston, it exposed cracks in their foundation. They finished the season strong, reaching the Western Conference Finals, but their run ended at the hands of John Stockton and Karl Malone's Utah Jazz, who delivered a devastating buzzer beater to send the Rockets home. Age, chemistry, and lack of depth proved to be their undoing, and their so-called super team faded into history as a what-if rather than a dynasty. Looking back, the January 11th game is remembered not because the Rockets were terrible, but because they were supposed to be great. They had the names, the talent, the history. But against Jordan, none of it mattered. He didn't just beat them, he controlled them, humiliated them, and reminded everyone watching that the gap between greatness and true dominance was massive. Clyde Drexler, Charles Barkley, and Hakeem Olajuwon were legends in their own right. But on that night in Chicago, they were just the latest victims of Michael Jordan's reign. Decades later, the memory of that game still resonates because it captures the essence of what made Jordan different. It wasn't just the stats, though they were incredible. It was the aura. He bent defenses, dictated pace, and made even Hall of Famers look powerless. Nights like this weren't flukes. They were the reason why the Bulls felt untouchable, why the dynasty seemed inevitable, and why Jordan stood on a level all his own. Against 3 future Hall of Famers, Jordan didn't just compete, he embarrassed them. And in doing so, he reminded the world why the NBA crown never left his head. What made the game even more unforgettable was how Jordan seemed to thrive in moments where others might have felt the weight of expectation. The Rockets walked into Chicago with the kind of roster fans dreamed about, but Jordan walked onto the floor with something they didn't. An ironclad belief that no one, no matter how decorated, was on his level. It wasn't arrogance, it was reality. He had spent a career proving that when the lights were brightest, he wasn't just ready for the moment, he owned it. That night against Houston, the bigger the stage got, the smaller the Rockets looked in comparison. Fans watching from around the league couldn't ignore the symbolism. The Rockets represented the league's attempt at building a super team before super teams were a trend. Yet all their collective experience, their championships, and their reputations couldn't match the sheer will of one man. That was Jordan's greatest weapon. His ability to take the aura of his opponents and turn it into fuel, dismantling their confidence until all that was left was frustration. Barkley couldn't score, Drexler couldn't find rhythm, and even Olajuwon's brilliance was overshadowed by Jordan's control. What was meant to be a clash of titans turned into a lesson in what true dominance looks like. The aftermath of that night left a lasting imprint on both teams. For the Bulls, it reinforced their identity as the standard of excellence, a dynasty that could swat away challengers without flinching. For the Rockets, it served as a harsh reality check. They weren't just chasing the Bulls in the standings, they were chasing something intangible, something that couldn't be replicated with trades or star power. Chemistry, trust, and the relentless edge Jordan brought to every game were elements that couldn't be built overnight. Houston never truly recovered from the gap that Jordan exposed, and their window closed before it really opened. And in the bigger picture, that game became another piece of Jordan's mythology. It wasn't just about the 32 points or the blowout scoreline. It was about the aura that followed him wherever he went. Games like these are why decades later, people still point to Jordan not just as the greatest of his time, but as the measuring stick for greatness across eras. The night he embarrassed Hakeem, Clyde, and Barkley wasn't just another win in the record books. It was another reminder that when it came to basketball supremacy, there was Michael Jordan, and then there was everyone else.